Are Wendigos still among us? The name alone stirs unease, a whisper in the dark woods, a warning passed down in long winters when hunger gnaws at the belly and survival presses against the soul. The Wendigo is more than a legend. It's a curse, a spirit, and perhaps a mirror of humanity's darkest potential. But what is it, really? A creature stalking the frozen forests of the north? A spirit that slips into men's hearts when desperation strikes? Or simply a story woven to remind us of the cost of greed and betrayal? In Algonquian lore, the Wendigo is the embodiment of insatiable hunger, a being that, once awakened, can never be satisfied. It feasts on flesh but finds no fullness. It hunts kin, neighbors, even its own family. And with every act, it grows more monstrous, more hollow, more estranged from the human soul it once carried. And the curse does not always come from being attacked. Many traditions hold that the Wendigo is not born, it's made. Made when a man or woman breaks the deepest taboos. When, in famine or in madness, they turn against those closest to them. In those moments of betrayal, the spirit of the Wendigo takes root. The victim of hunger becomes the hunter of flesh. And from that point onward, they are marked. Cursed to wander, cursed to devour, cursed to never rest. It's easy to dismiss this as just another fireside story. Yet the Wendigo appears again and again, not in just one village, not in just one tribe, but across a wide swath of North America, stretching from the Cree and Ojibwe of Canada to the Innu of the far north, even whispered among certain peoples along the Great Lakes. It's not the invention of one storyteller. It's a presence in the land itself, woven into the memory of the people who endured brutal winters and the temptation that came with them. Here's the question that lingers in the shadows. What if the Wendigo is not just folklore? What if it's something older, darker, a pattern that repeats across cultures and centuries? A curse of blood, hunger, and betrayal that humans keep rediscovering, like an echo that refuses to fade. Because whether you believe in monsters of the flesh or monsters of the spirit, the truth is undeniable. Wendigo stories have survived because they speak to something real, something we fear not just in the woods, but in ourselves. And if the Wendigo is only a story, then why do sightings still continue? Why do whispers still spread of gaunt figures with hollow eyes, stalking hunters in the snow, or standing on frozen trails where no footprints lead? Why do people even now claim the Wendigo walks, waits, and watches? Tonight, we will walk that line between myth and memory. From the historical case of Swift Runner, who returned from a winter in the wilds alone, his family gone, his soul consumed, to the old Jesuit recordings describing devil spirits in the snow, to modern sightings that suggest that the Wendigo has not faded, but only waits for those willing to listen. We'll even explore the chilling parallels to the first murderer in Scripture, Cain, and the curse that drove him into exile, forever marked, forever wandering. Different cultures, different words, but perhaps the same story. And when all this is said and done, the question remains, if Wendigos are still among us, what does that say about us? I'm J-Rod, and this is Hollow Light, where the veil is thin, the stories begin. the tragic story of Swift Runner. In the winter of 1878, a Cree man named Swift Runner set out into the frozen forests of Alberta with his wife, 6 children, his mother, and his brother. Like many families of the time, they left for the bush to trap, hunt, and survive the long northern winter. Months later, when spring returned, only one man came back. It was Swift Runner. When he arrived at a nearby Hudson's Bay Company post, the trappers and missionaries there noticed something odd. Swift Runner did not look like a man who had suffered famine. He was healthy. He was well fed even. But his family, they were gone. Every one of them. Suspicion grew. When the authorities pressed him, Swift Runner led them back to his winter camp. What they found chilled even hardened frontiermen. There were human bones, some broken open for marrow. There were scattered remains showed signs of butchering. Pieces of flesh had even been cooked. It was undeniable. Swift Runner had eaten his own family. But when confronted, his explanation was not madness nor simple hunger. He claimed he had been possessed by a spirit, the Wendigo. According to Swift Runner, the spirit had come upon him during the dark months of isolation. At first, it whispered hunger. Then it drove him to kill, one by one, his wife, his children, his kin, until no one remained but him. When he finally emerged from the wilderness, he carried not only his crime, but the belief that he had become something else, something cursed, something Wendigo. The Canadian authorities did not accept his defense. He was arrested and taken to Fort Saskatchewan, where he confessed openly to priests and officials alike. His claim of Wendigo possession became part of the record, not just as hearsay, but as his own explanation. And on December 20th, 1879, Swift Runner was executed by hanging. What makes the story so powerful isn't only its horror, it's that it happened in a time and place where both worlds collided. On one side, the Cree oral traditions that recognize the Wendigo as a real spiritual danger, one that could overtake the weak or the desperate. On the other, the colonial legal system that saw only crime, madness, and punishment. Swift Runner stood in the crossroads of those two understandings, and in his death, both realities collided. To his people, his fate could be understood as proof of the Wendigo's power, a warning that even kinship and love could be consumed by the hunger of the spirit. To the courts, it was an open and shut case of murder and cannibalism, a man driven mad by hunger and isolation. Yet the question lingers, even more than a century later. Was Swift Runner insane, or did he fall prey to something older, darker, and very real? Some modern scholars call this an early case of Wendigo psychosis, a controversial diagnosis once used to describe individuals who believe themselves possessed by an insatiable urge for human flesh. But reducing it to psychology alone risks ignoring the deeper truth, that in Cree tradition, Swift Runner's crime wasn't only a human failing, it was the proof of a spiritual curse. Once he broke the taboo, once he killed those closest to him, the Wendigo took hold. Swift Runner's story has endured because it's not just a tale of one man's fall, but a reminder of how close survival and starvation, faith and fear, sanity and curse can sit beside one another in the cold of winter. And it shows us that the Wendigo legend was not only whispered in the dark lodges or campfires, it made its way into courts, into colonial records, and into history itself. The Wendigo was not just a story. For some, it was an accusation. For others, a defense. For Swift Runner, it was the last name he ever spoke. Origin of Wendigo. The Wendigo may feel like the stuff of horror movies today. Gaunt figures with deer skulls, antlers, and glowing eyes. But the earliest descriptions are very different. To uncover them, we have to turn back to the people who first spoke of the Wendigo, and to the journals of outsiders who heard the whispers and wrote them down. The Wendigo originates with the Algonquian-speaking peoples, Cree, Ojibwe, Innu, and others whose lands stretch across the northern forests of Canada and the Great Lakes. In their oral traditions, the Wendigo is not a myth to entertain children, but a spirit woven into daily life. The creature represents hunger, greed, betrayal, and the terrifying possibility of what starvation can drive a human being to do. Jesuit missionaries traveling among these tribes in the 1600s began recording Wendigo stories in their journals. They wrote of a devil spirit in the snow, a figure of emaciation that drove men to acts unspeakable. In the Jesuit Relations of 1636, one priest described men and women afflicted with what he called a strange madness, a hunger for human flesh. They claimed some believed that they were possessed, transformed into something no longer human. Fur traders and explorers in the 18th and 19th centuries also recorded encounters with what they described as the Wendigo. They didn't always see the creature itself, but they heard the accounts. People disappearing in the winter, returning gaunt and speaking of insatiable hunger, or families broken by sudden violence that no one could explain. For those who lived through the winters of the far north, the Wendigo was not entertainment. It was a warning. And the descriptions varied. Some spoke of the Wendigo as a towering skeletal figure, its skin stretched thin over bones, lips gnawed away, eyes sunken deep. Others said it was more spirit than flesh, moving through the trees, whispering into the ears of desperate men. Still others believed it could slip into a person unnoticed, lying dormant until hunger or greed cracked the door wide open. Then once the first taboo was broken, the Wendigo emerged fully, and the person was lost. Importantly, these early accounts never mention antlers or deer skulls. That imagery is a modern invention, popularized by movies, horror novels, and later reinterpretations. The Wendigo tradition is far more human and far more terrifying for it, because it was once a person, a father, a mother, a hunter, a friend, and then they became something else. The role of the Wendigo in these communities was both spiritual and practical. It reinforced the taboo against cannibalism. It warned against greed in times of scarcity. It explained why some broke under pressure, and why hunger could drive a man to betray even his own kin. But beyond these lessons, it was also regarded as real, just as real as the forests, the snow, and the long winter nights. Some Jesuits dismissed the stories as superstition, while others feared they were hearing of true demonic possession. One fur trader in the 1700s wrote that a village was abandoned to the Wendigo, after several families vanished in midwinter, leaving only bones behind. For the people who lived there, it was not metaphor, it was presence. The Wendigo legend spread far because it was anchored in reality. The brutal winters of the North, where hunger was a constant threat. And it survived because it spoke to something deeper, The recognition that inside each of us lies a line that we must never cross. Once it is, the soul may not return. So when we read those old journals, those missionary reports, those fur trader tales, we're not just hearing campfire stories. We're hearing the echo of a warning passed down across centuries. Beware the hunger that never ends, for it will consume more than flesh. It will consume your soul. Curse of the Wendigo. There's a part of the Wendigo story that strikes deeper than fear of hunger. It's the idea that the curse is not random. It comes when blood is shed, when kin is betrayed. To many Algonquian peoples, the Wendigo is born when a man kills someone close to him, his wife, his children, his brother, his tribe, and then turns to the unthinkable act of consuming them. The Wendigo is not only a monster that attacks from the outside, it's a curse that begins within. It's the kinslaying turned into something eternal. And here's where another story arises from the pages of Scripture. In Genesis, Cain murders his brother Abel. It's the first blood spilled by human hands. For this act, God marks Cain and drives him into exile. He is condemned to be a wanderer upon the earth, forever separated from his kin and the ground that once gave him life. The story of Cain is not about hunger, but about betrayal, and about the mark that betrayal leaves behind. When you set these two traditions side by side, the parallels are haunting. Both speak of kinslaying, the deepest of betrayals. Both speak of a curse that follows, a punishment that cannot be undone. Both describe a wandering figure, cut off from community, never at rest. And both remind us that when blood guilt enters the world, it leaves a stain that reaches beyond one man's life. Of course, the Wendigo and the mark of Cain come from very different worlds. One is born from Algonquian oral tradition, and the other from the book of Genesis. While these are not the same story, perhaps they echo the same ancient fear, that when we betray our own, when we take the life of kin, something inside us is broken forever. Something that leaves us restless, marked, and never whole again. For Christians, Cain's story is a solemn warning of sin's consequence, of the weight of murder and the justice of God. For the Cree, the Ojibwe, and others, the Wendigo serves as a warning against greed, hunger, and betrayal of family. Different paths, different teachings, but both speaking of the danger of crossing that line and the curse that follows. And so the question lingers. Did the ancients simply tell different stories about the same truth? Was the Wendigo curse another way of warning against the very same act that brought Cain's mark into the world? Or are these parallels simply humanity's way of wrestling with the darkest corners of the soul, where the hunger for power or for survival turns brother against brother? Whatever the answer, the echo is chilling. Cain was cast out, marked to wander. The Wendigo is cursed to roam, never satisfied. Two stories, two cultures, but one truth. That when kinship is broken by blood, the curse lingers far longer than the act itself. Eyewitness accounts of Wendigo. The Wendigo is not just a shadow from the past. Even today, people claim to encounter shapes in the woods, eyes in the dark, and figures that seem more spirit than flesh. And while skeptics call them misidentifications, hallucinations, or campfire tales gone viral, the stories keep coming. They echo from the forests of Minnesota, across Ontario, into Wisconsin, and even further south. If the Wendigo was only a myth, why do people still swear they've seen it? Take, for example, a hunter in Manitowoc County, Wisconsin, David W. He recalls an encounter that still chills him.
It seemed so big. I felt it in the ground. It was behind a tree, and it first appeared to be a bear standing on its back legs. Then I thought I saw what I believed to be a very long, almost grayish hair. Estimated the creature to be 8 to 10 feet tall, dangly arms. Then it took 3 large steps, and it disappeared into the underbrush.
His description lines up with the oldest stories. Tall, skeletal, human-like, but not human. It didn't attack. It didn't speak. It simply showed itself, and then it was gone. Others report something far darker. A Reddit user from northern Minnesota described seeing something outside his cabin one freezing night.
It was tall, at least 7 or 8 feet tall, but emaciated with long, bony limbs. Its skin looked frosted, almost blackened, and its eyes were glowing. It smiled. Its teeth were cube-mini, too sharp. Let me in.
That chilling phrase, "let me in," mirrors the folklore. The Wendigo doesn't just stalk. It tempts. It whispers. It waits for the moment when fear or desperation leaves the door open. And for those who have heard the voice, they swear it is not imagination. It is invitation. Then there are those fleeting, flicker-like encounters that leave people shaken long after the moment has passed. Evelyn in Michigan reported seeing a pale figure in Coal Miners Park.
A pale, emaciated human with giant blue eyes. Limbs vastly disproportionate, moved incredibly quickly. It blinked, and it moved so quickly that it seemed to disappear behind the tree entirely.
Too fast for a man, too wrong in its proportions, too otherworldly to be explained away. She wasn't the first, and she won't be the last to walk out of the woods swearing she had glimpsed something waiting between the trees. Psychologists sometimes explain these accounts through the lens of what they call Wendigo psychosis, a culture-bound syndrome describing the fear of becoming a cannibal or delusions of insatiable hunger. Modern psychiatry debates whether this condition truly exists, or whether it was an attempt to label spiritual beliefs with medical terms. But for those who tell their stories today, psychosis isn't their explanation. They believe what they saw. And then there's Jack Fiddler, the OG Cree shaman from the early 1900s who claims to have defeated more than a dozen Wendigos. Some were people believed to be on the verge of transforming, driven mad with hunger, pleading to be released before the spirit consumed them. To his people, this was not a metaphor. It was a crisis, a spiritual disease that could spread and that had to be dealt with. So are Wendigos still among us? Skeptics will say no. But hunters, hikers, and whole communities keep whispering the same warnings their ancestors did. Maybe the Wendigo isn't only a monster in the woods. Maybe it's a curse that still lives, waiting for the moment that when isolation, hunger, or betrayal opens the door. And maybe, just maybe, the stories persist because somewhere out there, beyond the tree line, something still waits, watching and hungry. Light the lantern. From whispers of the starving winter camps to the tragedy of Swift Runner, to the old journals of priests and fur traders, the Wendigo has walked alongside us for centuries. It is hunger given flesh. It is betrayal given curse. It is a reminder that sometimes the darkest monsters are born not in the wilderness, but in the human soul. And yet, the story doesn't end in the past. Today, people still see gaunt figures in the trees. They still hear whispers outside their cabins at night. They still tell of glowing eyes and pale shapes that vanish too quickly to be explained. Some call it psychosis, others call it folklore. But for those who've looked into the dark and seen something staring back, the Wendigo is still here. So what are we to make of it? Maybe the Wendigo is both a spiritual warning and a living presence. A legend meant to guard against greed and betrayal, and a shadow that still waits in the frozen woods. A mirror that reflects what happens when humanity's most sacred lines are crossed. If you have a story, a real encounter, a family tale, or a glimpse of the veil, send it in. You might just hear it on a future episode. And if you made it this far in the video, please post "Don't do it" in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe for more tales from the veil. God bless, stay prayed up, and remember, some lights are meant to guide you home, while others are warnings.